Newstalk can exclusively reveal the results of a survey that they have carried out with Amarach research looking at a number of issues regarding trans rights. Now, this is a really contentious topic. There are people with very, very strong views one way or the other. There are plenty of other people in between who are not quite sure how they feel. And behind them all, there are people who identify as trans trying to navigate these choppy waters, which is why this survey is so important and so interesting. And our chief reporter, Barry Whyte, has been running through the findings for us. Barry, what has this poll found?
Hi, Kieran. Good afternoon. So for this poll, Amarach Research surveyed 1,000 people, and this is a nationally representative sample. So we asked people of all ages, over the age of 18, male and female, across the country for this poll. There were 9 questions in total, and we will go through 5 of them on the show now, while we will go through the findings of 4 other questions in Newstalk Breakfast tomorrow morning. So the first question that people were asked, Kieran, was, do you identify as A, the gender of your biological sex at birth, B, a gender different from that of your biological sex at birth, and C, prefer not to say? So 98% of people said they identify as the gender of their biological sex at birth, while 1% said they identify as a gender different from that of their biological sex at birth, while 1% said they prefer not to say. So that's the less controversial of the questions out of the way.
And the least surprising as well. So 98% don't identify as trans, 1% do effectively. Sports was what we looked at next. So the question, I understand, should sports bodies allow people who have transitioned play with the gender they identify with? So in other words, somebody goes through male puberty, transitions to female, should they be allowed to play ladies Gaelic football or camogie?
Yeah, Kieran. So 4 in 10, 40% of people do not agree that sports bodies should allow people who have transitioned to play with the gender they identify with, while 33% of the people surveyed believe it depends on the sport when it comes to allowing people who have transitioned to play a sport with the gender they identify with. 11% said yes, that people who have transitioned should be allowed to play with the gender they identify with when it comes to sports, while 13% said they were not sure, and 3% either had no opinion or preferred not to say. And Kieran, I asked some people this very question on the streets of Dublin today. Do they think sports bodies should allow people who have transitioned to play with the gender they identify with? And here is what they said.
You know, I think it'd be terrible if some lady who could qualify for the Olympics, but some guy who changes over, comes in and takes over her place, you know. You have to have a bit of fairness in it.
I don't think so, no. I don't believe so. I don't think it's fair. Women's sport has developed greatly over the years, and there's far higher levels of participation, for example, in soccer. It's become a very big game for young girls, and it's developing. So I don't believe that the participation by young men or men who have a completely different, have gone through a different experience in terms of their development and growth and so on, should be allowed to participate. No, I don't believe so.
I think that's a very hard question, and maybe it should be like a sport by sport basis. I'd have to do more research into it. I'm happy to play sports with people, trans people, but how far are they into their transition? How long has it been going on?
In principle, I wouldn't have an issue with it, but I think it's probably something that needs to be looked at in terms of, strength, etc. of somebody. Is it fair to the people that, women, let's say, if they're transitioned to female, against them? But on principle, I don't have a major issue with it.
All right, so that is just some of the views of people when it comes to sports participations. The overwhelming majority really saying no, they shouldn't be allowed to participate. 40% outright no, 33% dependent on the sport. I guess that means they're agnostic about snooker, but less so about rugby or something. As part of the survey then, Barry, people were asked, should gender-affirming care, such as counselling and hormone replacement treatment, be made available to teenagers under the age of 18 who wish to transition?
Yeah, Kieran. So the people who were surveyed are more supportive of teenagers under 18 years of age receiving gender-affirming care, such as counselling and hormone replacement treatment, when there is parental consent. So 31% said yes with parental consent, but only 7% said yes without parental consent, while 47% said gender affirming care such as counselling and hormone replacement treatment should not be made available to teenagers under 18 years of age who wish to transition. So it doesn't matter if there's parental consent there. There was 47% said no. Well, Kieran, the poll also asked people, should teenagers under 18 years of age who wish to transition be given access to puberty blockers? Again, 49% said no to this. 31% said yes with parental consent. 6% said yes without parental consent, while 23% said don't know. And I asked these people on the streets of Dublin, should gender affirming care such as counselling and hormone replacement treatment be made available to teenagers under 18 years of age who wish to transition? And should teenagers under 18 years of age who wish to transition be given access to puberty blockers? And here's what people had to say.
Well, I don't believe so. Certainly with the younger age group, the early teens, where children are quite often confused about their sexuality and so on, and they need this counselling certainly is important, but certainly to put children onto hormone treatment at such an early stage in life is very dangerous in my opinion.
Even if they had parental consent?
Even where they have parental consent.
And what about teenagers under 18 who wish to transition being given access to puberty blockers?
Well, under 18, I suppose, is somewhat different insofar as they are more mature. But certainly the earlier group, 12, 13, 14, I don't believe people are in a position, are ready to make decisions like that, which have lifelong impact on them.
I think definitely the government needs to put more like kind of therapy and counselling available before like maybe going on to it, because obviously it is a very hard thing to do. But I think, like if you know that you're in the wrong gender.
Permission maybe as well.
Yeah, so you think there should be parental
Under 18,
consent?
only, maybe even under 16.
Yeah, there's definitely a huge issue there. I think
Like Ireland is one of the worst, like medical,
Yeah.
like for trans people in Europe at least anyway.
I think the important thing would be to establish that the child concerned was not being coerced into this or, taking a line from others, so to speak. So that's why I'd be just a little loath to do that. I think you'd have to have good conversations between the child, the parents and the professionals.
And what about puberty blockers? Should teenagers under 18 who wish to transition be given puberty blockers?
Again, it's the same, my same thoughts would be on that really. It's the just informed consent, I suppose, really.
Well, I think counselling probably is, so long as a taxpayer I wouldn't have to pay too much for it. But, it's counselling, let's say, or advice or something like that. But then when you actually start to bring in treatment at a young age like that, I wouldn't be, I think you'd have to look hard and long at that. You'd need a lot of medical advice on something like that.
And what about puberty blockers? Should
I wouldn't be, I think again you'd need a lot of medical advice on something like that, because the teenage years, people can change their mind, people can be influenced by friends and so on. So I'd be very wary of something like that at a younger age.
I think what's happening now with the young people today, they don't know what they don't know who they are, what they are.
Some of the questions we asked were regarding young people. So, for example, should gender affirming care such as counselling and a hormone replacement treatment be made available to teenagers under 18?
No, I don't think so, no. Because I honestly don't think they really don't know who they are.
All right, so that is the views of people when it comes to children and access to kind of puberty blockers and things like that. Really contentious. But another question, Barry, I want to move on to. Do you think passports and government issued documents should have options for gender other than male and female, such as gender neutral?
Yeah, people were also asked this. So 33% of people said yes. Passports and government issued documents should have a gender neutral option, while 43% said no, there should not be a gender neutral option when it comes to passports and government issued documents, while 23% answered don't know. However, Kieran, the majority of people I asked this on the streets of Dublin today said they would have no problem if gender neutral was an option for passports and government issued documents.
Yeah, of
Yes,
course, yeah.
definitely. And I think they should be able to change their birth cert to whatever gender they want.
Absolutely, I have no issues whatsoever with that. I think whatever people identify as should be put on their identity documents.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't see any reason why they couldn't get a passport in whatever, whether male, female, or whatever else they are.
One of my children, there are a few people in their school that are trans, and it's not an issue for them, for the rest of the school kids there. So I think in a way, I think it's a personal issue.
I think where people have gone through a process and where they've gone through a change and so on, and they're adults, and I think that is a different matter. But I think just self-identification, and therefore that becomes a matter of a record on the passport. I don't believe that should exist.
And just finally, is the trans debate even a debate that's happening with the public, or is it something the media kind of get caught up in?
Well, I mean, there's been very little debate because people are afraid to express opinions for fear of being considered, old-fashioned or whatever, or bigoted in some way, and it's nothing to do with that. So, yes, it should be more openly debated